White Sox, White Sox, go, go, White Sox. Let's go, 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 White Sox. We're with you all the way. You're always in there fighting and you do your best. We're glad to have you out here in the Middle West. We're gonna root, White Sox and cheer you on to victory. When we're in the stands, we'll make those rafters ring. All through the season, you will hear us sing. Let's go, 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 White Sox. Chicago's proud of you.
Welcome in, Frosty Takes, special edition episode with my main man. He's back, Alex Russell, long overdue. White Sox expert, like myself, we consider ourselves White Sox experts. Even though your Twitter account is a Kopech Stan account.
That's a fact. Oh man, happy to be back on. Thanks for having me as always. We got so much to get into.
We have so much to get into, and we apologize to the listeners because this is going to start with the White Sox managerial search. And honestly, we can start with Tony getting fired because we didn't do an episode over the last 4 to 6 months. I can't believe it's been that long, which is crazy. But we're going to get into everything. Russ, how you feeling? Spring training kicked off last week.
I am feeling the way that I think I'm going to describe my feelings about the White Sox throughout this podcast. Fine. I'm not overly excited. I'm not terribly pessimistic. I feel fine about this team. I feel like they didn't address some of the holes that we talked about in our last podcast. I feel like they made some good signings. I'm pretty high on Pedro Grifol. I'm disappointed to see that the defense has been terrible in the first 3 spring training games. But I feel just fine about this team. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, we differ in this. I am actually, shocker. I'm a little better than fine. I am pleasantly surprised with Grifol and how detailed he's been, and we'll dive into that. And I'm also pleasantly surprised at some of the moves they made because the way we thought this offseason would go, at least I didn't think they'd spend on anyone like Andrew Benintendi. But let's not rush into it. We're going to start with the managerial search. So we have Tony leaving, going away, wherever the fuck he is. I hope he's healthy, but stay the fuck away from our favorite baseball team. And we still talk about it to this day. It's like that's at that point. If you're going to hire Tony La Russa, just keep Ricky Renteria, right?
Yes, 100%.
Like I just don't understand what we were doing. Like from that point on, it was a sour taste in your mouth. I get that 2021 was really good, and it was a lot of fun, but there were even some moments that year. The whole who was it? Our favorite designated hitter. Mercedes. The whole Mercedes thing with the Twins and like don't pimp home runs when we're down by that much. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? The MLB is trying to market itself. Like, let the guy hit homers. But Tony's gone. In our last episode, we said we don't want anyone that's under Mike Matheny, and we get someone that's under Mike Matheny. Which I would have done a 180 on that after getting to know and understand Pedro Grifol. When that news first broke, what was your knee-jerk reaction and your reaction of their overall search? I thought it was a good process.
Yeah, I think a few things to note about the process. Number one, there's no question that this was Rick's hire. And I think that that's really encouraging, is that Rick finally got the keys to the castle and he was able to do an extensive managerial search and hire who he wanted to hire. And that's really important because for the longest time, during the Tony era, Tony was the second most powerful guy in the organization. We saw him cut off Rick's balls multiple times, and Rick got his man. And you could just, I felt happy for Rick on that day of him introducing Grifol. You could tell it was such a different tone than when he introduced Tony. He was so smiley. He was happy about it. And you could tell that this really was his hire, which is how it is supposed to work, obviously. As far as Grifol specifically, I think like a lot of Sox fans, I'm not going to lie, I hadn't heard the name before. I wasn't super familiar with him. But at the same time, during the introductory press conference, I was really excited about what I heard. He said all the things. I think to the extent that one believes you can win the press conference, he won the press conference. He talked about the things that fans wanted to hear, as far as this team, needing to get better at fundamentals, needing to get better at base running, needing to get better at the little things, needing to pay attention to the details. The other really interesting thing that I thought he talked about during one of his press conferences was that sitting on the other side of the field from the Sox last year, he talked about energy, and he talked about how you could tell whether this team showed up to play that night or whether they didn't. And that's so important, because I think it is really hard to make a judgment on energy and effort. And I think that that's something that a lot of fans were frustrated about with the White Sox last year, is just feeling like the team wasn't hustling, and feeling like there was no energy, and feeling like they were lifeless, but then also understanding that part of that could be attributable to the injuries and the fact that they were being told not to run as hard as they should have been. So I think that him recognizing that and him calling that out had to be music to a lot of White Sox fans' ears, and that he saw what we saw last year, and hearing him say that he saw what we saw, I think it was a weight off a lot of Sox fans' shoulders.
Yeah, and you put it really well. This is Rick's hire. He was beaming. Like, that dude looked happy, and we know, let's just call it what it is. I think Rick would have did a lot of things differently 2020 going into 2021 if Tony wasn't the manager. Especially 2021 going into 2022, where you extend Lurie, you sign Kendall Graveman and Joe Kelly, thankfully, because of the unfortunate Liam Hendriks situation, which I want to touch on. The guy's fucking throwing bullpens and going through chemo. That's insane. But it's nice. And now it's nice we have them. But last year, that's a team we really didn't think needed that. You could have had Raylo and like Lambert. They would emerge as your top end bullpen guys, and you would have been fine. But it is what it is. I don't know if Larry makes the team out of spring. We'll get into that as well. But like you said, Pedro Grifol, the first thing I notice about him is when he speaks, you want to listen. He's a great communicator. And honestly, like, I don't want to sound like too much of a homer because we have to see him manage and all this stuff. But everything I've listened to and heard, it's like it's someone I want to play for. He has a 5-day outlook and doesn't look farther than that. He's not talking World Series or bust and doing all the shit, because I think, unfortunately, Tony wasn't his St. Louis Cardinals day, Tony. And he was just like, okay, we're going to get to the World Series. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. Just do whatever. I liked in the Sox put something out on their Instagram, and Grifol asked Moncada and someone else, like, hey, what did you do in the cage? They're like, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And he's like, no, that's not how we do things. That's not how it's supposed to go. It needs to be this, this, and this. That's what the White Sox needed. These guys need direction. They need to be handed drills. And then listening to the White Sox Talk podcast with Chuck and Ryan McGuffey, they're seeing things we've never seen before, as far as details, preparation, drills. And I think what we all felt last year was a lack of energy, and that also stemmed from a lack of preparedness, whether that was the coaching staff getting people ready to play or injuries, like you said. But it's just hard because you had that many injuries in 21 and still found a way to win games and do things. Funny, again, we didn't want a Mike Matheny guy. We got one. And I, at this point, couldn't be happier. Obviously, we'll see what happens and see if he walks someone with a 1-2 count. But you never know. Pedro Grifol reminds me of a Ricky Renteria. I don't know about you.
Maybe, yeah, a little bit from the energy perspective. I could see that. I could see a little bit of Ricky Renteria in him. No, I think that, again, yeah, I think you're right on everything that you said there, obviously. I think that the attention to detail and the drills that they're doing and just the general energy around spring training does seem to be different this year. With that said, you might be more optimistic than I am. They're going to have to show it to me. And the reason that I say that, Nick, is because I do think Grifol is going to be good. And again, he said all the right things. At the same time, they're counting on a lot from him. They are really counting on him to turn around a lot of things. Again, going back to the defense, fundamentals, base running, hitting cutoff men, all those little things, and I'll hit on it again, as I did in the last podcast, all those little things that Cleveland did really well last year, that the Sox did really terribly last year. They are counting on Grifol to turn a lot of those things around, because you are looking at largely the same roster. And I know we'll get into the free agent signings, but Grifol is saying all the right things. He's also got a really tall task in front of him.
Very tall task in front of him. This isn't going to be easy, and I don't envision the Sox running away with this thing. Cleveland has the confidence. Minnesota with bringing Correa back. I still don't love their pitching staff and the health there, but they're going to have confidence with a leader like that, and Buxton as well. As long as Buxton's healthy, they're going to be pretty okay. And I think the one thing that plays into their advantages here, two things: the shift being gone with some of their left-handed bats, especially Yaz, and then two, that they don't play the division as much. As shitty as that sounds, everyone has to play every team. So that's an advantage, because Cleveland and Minnesota against other teams last year were fucking terrible. Now, that's also embarrassing, because we need to beat the AL Central to win your division.
Right. Yeah, the balance schedule is going to be interesting this year, and I do think that, assuming the Sox can play better against the division, I actually could see the balance schedule hurting them a little bit, because I don't really believe in Minnesota. I know that they have Correa coming back, but I'm along with you in that I don't believe in their pitching staff. And obviously, as many games as you can get against the Tigers and the Royals would be better for the Sox. So I think it will be interesting to see how that balance schedule works out, because obviously they didn't play well against the division, but it's also the weakest division.
Fuck the Royals. I don't want to play them. We finished a game below 500 against them last year. I don't want to see those guys.
Yeah, well, case in point, right? I mean, you should beat up on the Royals, but they don't beat up on the Royals.
Right. We'll preview the AL Central later in the podcast too. But you're looking at this coaching staff, and this is why I'm optimistic, a little more optimistic than you. I love Charlie Montoyo as a bench coach, veteran skipper or former veteran skipper. He's going to be in Grifol's ear about, I would guess, day-to-day stuff. Ethan Katz back. Bullpen coach is Kurt Hassler. Okay, whatever. Hitting coach is Jose Castro. Came over from the Braves, won a World Series there in their hitting department. Really like what he's doing so far and preaching completely opposite of what we heard from, God, his name escapes me because I think I wiped him out of my mind. Whoever told Andrew Vaughn to hit
Frank
300.
Menachino.
Yeah, Frank Menachino.
Yeah, Frank Menachino.
And the dude before, too, just like, they're gone out of my head. And then the assisting hitting coach is Chris Johnson, who he was with AAA last year. Third base coach, new Eddie Rodriguez. Mike Tozar, Major League Field Coordinator. That's Grifol's boy. And there were rumors before the season started, or before spring training, or before he got signed, as that position was going to be the hitting coach. What I liked about this offseason is, like, hey, Grifol, Tozar live in Miami. Romy Gonzalez was there. Kalas was there. Robert was there. I like the continuity all together, like togetherness, all this shit. But like you said, you got to prove this shit. You can't have people missing 60, 70 games. Can't have Yaz missing 60, 70 games. Can't have TA out for however many games he was out last year, 2 separate stints. It can't happen. Do you think that we'll finally see some positive injury regression last year? Because I remember us both looking each other in the face last year and being like, dude, we'll be fine. There's no way all these injuries could happen again. And then we got fucked.
Yeah, I want to go back just quickly to one point you made about the coaching staff, and that's Charlie Montoyo. I am very optimistic about him, and I am excited about him, because I do think that with Grifol being a first-year manager, having somebody with managerial experience alongside with him in the dugout will hopefully cut down on some of those first-year mistakes, especially with Montoyo having managed in the AL East and managed in a lot of competitive games. I think that's going to be really important, and I think that's going to be an overlooked addition to the coaching staff, but I think it's going to be important. As far as the injuries, man, it's so tough to say. I mean, you would love to think that after the injuries that this team has experienced over the last 2 seasons, that, to your point, that some positive regression will happen. At the same time, it's hard to say that it for sure will, because we've seen so many guys who just can't stay on the field. I mean, I did enjoy hearing from Robert Jr., excuse me.
Hey, first off, I'm so fucking pissed because I have a Robert jersey and he adds the junior.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, man. Like, what?
No. You have a vintage jersey now. You have a vintage jersey.
It's true. Maybe it'll go. Maybe if he wins MVP one day, like it'll be worth something.
There you go. But I did enjoy hearing him recognize that he needs to stay on the field more, and just hearing that I think was comforting in a way. Just knowing that they understand that they haven't been fully healthy, and not that that's not obvious to them, but just them knowing how important it is for them to be on the field as often as possible, I think is important. Impossible to say. I do think that obviously the depth on this team over the last couple of years, well, specifically in 2022, was the lack of depth was pretty glaring. Yeah. And so I do like some of the additions that they made, specifically in the outfield, just adding Victor Reyes, adding Jake Marisnick, adding Billy Hamilton,
Billy.
Hey, Billy the Kid's back. You'll love to see it. Yeah. But just having some guys with some major league experience out there who hopefully aren't going to get Danny Mendick hurt if they have to fill in the
Dude, outfield. I saw that guy was playing today.
Was he?
I can't believe he's still in the organization. He had 2 hits, but they kept Steve was saying Steve Stone. He was saying some Housley, whatever the fuck.
Adam Hazley. Yep.
Hazley. He's like, he really hit the ball well last year. I'm like, dude, he killed Danny Mendick. Like come on. He blew out
Danny Mendick after Danny was playing so well.
Yeah, like the hottest guy in the MLB, and smoked him. But yeah, so let's get right into free agency then. We thought they weren't going to spend very much. I mean, technically they didn't outside of Benintendi, but I didn't even think that would happen. I think it's about a perfect as a move as you could get. And it helps that Rick Hahn has been in love with this dude for like the last 6 years.
Absolutely. No, the Benintendi signing is good. I don't think it's great, but I think it's good. And it obviously addresses a need in regards to a left-handed bat who puts the ball in play, who is good defensively. I will caution some fans. I've been hearing, he's a Gold Glove defender.
Yeah,
no.
I would say he has an average to slightly below average arm too. His glove's pretty good.
He has a below average arm.
Yeah.
Yes. His glove is good. And obviously there will be some addition by subtraction, just not having Eloy and not having Vaughn in the outfield, and having a competent major league outfielder out there in left field is going to be, just great to watch. So, all around, I think the Benintendi signing is good. I am interested to see how his power or lack of power plays at Guaranteed Rate Field. I thought some of his comments about how he had to adjust his swing to not try to hit for as much power because of the deep alleys in Kansas City were very interesting. And I thought it was good to, hear that he has that awareness. So I think with Guaranteed Rate obviously being a launching pad in the summer, I'm hopeful that he can be, 15 plus home runs this year.
I can't deal with another summer of this warning track shit or this dead ball, whatever it was. How many balls last year, Russ? I mean, we were bitching about this in April and May a lot too. Like I remember those few first home series. Like what the fuck? Like,
yep.
It didn't make any sense. And then other teams were just bashing it out 5 rows deep. So I don't know what was going on there. Maybe some guys hurt and had something to do with it. But yeah, no. I saw Benintendi hit 6 homers last year. Not a lot, but the year before he had 17. So he has pop. He can hit 15. Right. If he has 15, that would be perfect. Exactly what this team needs.
That'd be absolutely. And in regards to the warning track power, I thought it was interesting. I remember Jim Margulis made this point at some point. Jim Margulis from Sox Machine said this at some point last season. But I think that the Sox in particular did not or saw a lot of balls dying on the warning track because they had guys who had all fields power. Vaughn has all fields power. Eloy has all fields power. Abreu had all fields power. But a lot of balls that were hit the opposite way last year, not just on the Sox, but across baseball, if they were hit the opposite way, they weren't going out as often. So I think that the Sox in particular, having those guys with all fields power, were kind of a microcosm of that trend across baseball. And so obviously with, our buddy Rob Manfred, you never know which kind of baseball you're going to get this year, but I sure hope to see some more homers. And yeah, Benintendi can hit 15. I'll be perfectly happy.
Yeah, let's move into the White Sox first move in free agency, which has become a pretty big mess, unfortunately. Mike Clevinger, obviously, we're not going to comment on an ongoing case and all that BS, but 670 thing was wild with his former baby mama, and no disrespect to her or anything, or 670 the score for doing what they're doing. I mean, if he has a right to talk, she has a right to talk, but kind of a crazy situation, not what was said and everything. And yeah, just not good. And it's the MLB couldn't tell them about the investigation, and there's no way of knowing. But I feel like this just all comes back to maybe just give Rodon what he wanted, and he probably signs for here for 2 or 3 years after that 2021 move, and then you're not worried about this. Or, like we said, just bring back Johnny Cueto.
Cueto would have been fine with me. Cueto looks great at the time, now, obviously. I think my issue with the Clevinger thing, just strictly from a baseball perspective, why did you need to jump the market to get him? If you wanted to add Mike Clevinger in the middle of January and he was still out there and you said, hey, we'll take a flyer on this guy, fine. I could understand it. But no, once again, just like Adam Eaton, we see the White Sox jump the market to go get a guy that nobody was banging down his door to sign. And now it's blowing up in their face. So I just don't understand it from a timing perspective. I do think that Clevinger has some upside. I think that, everybody's going to remember his 2018, 2019 seasons. And if he can get back to that, obviously you're looking at a high-end talent and a front of the rotation type of talent. But based on Clevinger's Tommy John and then how he performed in the playoffs last year, it was just unnecessary. I think there were better options out there for less money.
Why do you think they have the tendency to jump the market, prematurely jump the market, I think would be fair statements to make at this point, because a lot of these signings don't pan out. And like you said, Clevinger could still probably be out there. Let's be honest. And maybe the case comes out, maybe it doesn't. Before then, hindsight's 2020 always. But why are you jumping the market for these guys?
The only thing that I can think of is that Rick has not been in control so often and not felt empowered so often that when he sees his guy, and maybe Clevinger for whatever reason was his guy, because we did hear about how they were trying to trade for Clevinger back in 2020. Yeah. So when Rick sees his guy, he's like, I'm empowered. Damn it, I'm going to go get my guy. And Benintendi obviously has been his guy for a long time, and he went and got his guy in that regard. So that's the only thing that I can think of. But these jump the market signings have not worked. So I don't see why they felt the need to repeat that mistake. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's all I can think of.
Yeah, and it's just like, I don't know. It's just dumb. Like, there's no need for it. They're like, the only team you're competing with is yourself. Like, if some other team's going to sign Mike Clevinger, just go sign Cueto.
Go sign Cueto for less money. Go sign Syndergaard. Syndergaard signed for what, 1 year, and I think less than Clevinger. I'd have to look at the contract.
And guess what? He went to the Dodgers and probably going to have a really good fucking year.
Of course he is. Of course he is. I think we both agreed that they needed to sign a starter, but you didn't need to jump the market for this one.
Well, I think you more so than me, and this is another area where we disagree. What would your, like, so you don't think they did enough? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but that's where we differ in this offseason. You thought they could have done more, and there was let's just say food left on the table. In terms of a starter, so you signed Benintendi, you wouldn't change that. How would you have approached a starter differently, knowing the financial constraints, if I can say that word correctly?
I think that, again, there were better options out there than Clevinger for less money. Syndergaard was an obvious one. I wouldn't have minded them bringing back Cueto, although I do think Cueto is due for a lot of regression if you look at his xFIP versus his ERA from last year.
It reminded me of Alex Colomé when everyone was freaking out, like, oh, Colomé's fantastic, Bob. And you looked at the hard contact rate and then, like, the outs on hard hit balls, and you're like, this guy's going to get smoked.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah. And he did. Yeah. Oh, thank God it was mostly when he went to the Twins. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that my comment and our disagreement about being able to do more in the offseason, I'm not going to be overly critical of the Clevenger signing just because at the time I said it was fine. And again, that's going to be my theme throughout this podcast is it's fine. But my comment in regards to they could have done more is more in regards to second base and right field as opposed to starting pitching.
Fair. Now, would you have, let's say you have a choice to sign Andrew Benintendi or someone like a Chris Bassett and then do what you basically did with left field to what you did with the Clevenger move? You're basically just finding like a player on a one-year deal. Maybe it's Conforto at that point, or maybe it's Joey Gallo. Would you do that differently and go the starting pitcher route, or are you taking Benintendi over that better pitcher added to the rotation?
No, I'm taking Benintendi because I think that if they did nothing for the starting rotation, I'm really high on Davis Martin. I think that he could have slotted in as the number 5 this year. I also think that when you're talking about an everyday player versus a pitcher, most of the time that everyday player is going to get you more value. Benintendi fills multiple needs in regards to left-handed, gets on base, going to improve the defense for next year. So no, I'm not upset that they went with Benintendi, but I don't think it's a binary choice between, we had to go with Benintendi or we had to go with a pitcher. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's why if I can ever get in an MLB front office, there's one guy I'm taking with me, and his name is Alex Russell. Just great answer. Spot on. Other free agency moves, trying to think. Billy's back. We talked about that. We talked about some of the smaller outfield signings. I think Billy will probably make the team at some point or be up with the team. And I think he's a guy that can keep Tim Anderson very positive. They're tight. And he's a guy that's just a good guy to have around. And he's a problem later in games when you insert him into the lineup to steal a base. And he's great in the outfield. So I don't see that being a problem at all. Is there anyone? I have one person in mind. I guess we can talk about Elvis. Let's talk about Elvis first. So I guess you can call it a free agency signing, even though spring training. And this is where we really start to differ. I'm cool with the answer at second base being Elvis Andrus. My one white whale was Colton Wong, who the Seattle Mariners traded for. No surprising, Seattle's a very well-run organization, making the right moves for their team. I say Elvis over players you've mentioned like Gene Segura and others not because of numbers, but because he came in last year, was such a good leader, vibed with the clubhouse, and he's been on a lot of winning teams before and knows what it takes, and he isn't afraid to step up and say something. I think this team needs that at times with Jose Abreu leaving, and we know he wasn't a vocal leader anyway, but they need someone who's going to show them how to do things by example and do things the right way and say something when it needs to be said. Now, you feel differently, and there is a bet on this now.
No, okay, let me clarify my position.
You hate Elvis Andrus. Just say it.
I don't hate Elvis Andrus. I loved Elvis last year, and I'm not mad. I'm not mad that they ended up with Elvis Andrus. It's fine. It's not great. I think that you're going to be right back in the same position next year, having to readdress second base, because they haven't addressed it for forever, as we know. I think that what Elvis brings as far as leadership and as far as veteran presence, and we saw it last year when he would, call timeout and go talk to the pitcher when, in order to not use a mound visit, that stuff's great. I just think that he's definitely due for some offensive regression after last year. I don't think there's any way he's a 3.5 WAR player again this year. I think that there were better options out there. I think your idea of Colton Wong was a really good one. I think that the Sox actually did have the prospect capital to trade for Colton Wong if they wanted to. I will not die on the Gene Segura hill, but I will say that I would have taken Gene Segura over
just
Elvis
why
Andrus.
Can you tell me why? Read me the stats, do whatever you gotta do. We talked about this.
Sure. If you'd like me to break the cardinal rule and pull up the numbers, what number would you like to look at? He's a better player.
I just don't think he is.
He is, dude. I sent you the WAR breakdown from the last 5 seasons.
I just don't like
There's
him.
no question.
I don't like him, Russ. I don't
Okay,
like
well,
him.
there's your answer. You just don't.
I think Elvis is a better fit for this team.
But he's not a better player.
What was Segura's F4 last year?
It was like a 6.4 F4 versus a 4.8. So yes, we are very much arguing some ticky-tacky shit here. But
well, ladies and gentlemen, our bet is around. I'm betting Elvis Andrus, knock on wood, no injuries, no bullshit. It's going to be a 3 WAR over a 3 WAR better player, F4 better player next year. And Russ is betting against.
Wait.
Right?
I will
said
say
that, right?
Elvis. If you're saying he's going to be 3 WAR better than Segura, then I'd
No,
down on our bet.
No, I'm saying no.
Okay.
The number we agreed on, I'm saying it's over. Okay.
3 you're
WAR.
saying he is over
3 F4.
3 F4 next year. I will take the under, and I will be more than happy to pay you out if I'm wrong.
I'm telling you, man, I saw him fucking hitting today. It just looks good.
I hope you're right. He has not been over 3 WAR besides last year since 2017.
Hey, man, times are changing. He's in the AL Central.
Okay, well, that's fair.
He's gonna get some MVP votes. I'm just kidding, but I might need that to happen.
Dude, I hope you shove this conversation in my face.
You know, every time he does something good, I'm just gonna fucking shove it down your throat like I did today.
Oh, we're breaking third wall here, but just for the listeners, Nick was texting me during the spring training game today. Elvis looking real good out there.
That's gonna be all year.
Third spring training.
Dude, we might show up. We might meet each other at a Sox game this year. I just show up with an Elvis Andrus jersey for you.
You know what? That should be the bet. We have to buy one of the other an Elvis Andrus jersey.
I like that. Yeah. Okay, I'm in on that.
Okay. Oh, man. I hope I'm wrong, Nick. I hope I'm wrong.
We did this, like I said, we have a few little minor disagreements. For the most part, we think very which is fine. It's natural, but I'm very optimistic about Elvis Andrus, and it's not all from a numbers standpoint. Like, I don't think he's hitting 17 bombs this year, and I certainly hope that wouldn't lead the White Sox this year. You're looking for Vaughn and a bunch of other guys to take a step forward, especially with Vaughn not having to run around in the outfield anymore. But yeah, and that was, so we're going to end it pretty much there with their free agency. Like, it was more than I expected. And I know that's not a good trap to fall into. And I probably should be more on your side, a little more not pessimistic, but it's kind of like, let's wait and see how everything works out. But this team needed a player like Benintendi. We'll see what happens with Clevenger. Like you said, they kind of already had a 5th starter in Davis Martin, and he's kind of said he wanted to throw more innings, get to more to 200 innings, but we can't have Lance Lynn getting hurt. We can't have Michael Kopech fucking up his knee. We can't have Lucas Giolito being terrible. These things just can't happen. And let's move right into spring training. I mean, we're moving along this timeline. Mm-hmm. Let's start with the Tim Anderson comments, because there's been a lot of, I don't want to say drama this early in the year, but it's the fucking White Sox. There's been some drama.
Absolutely.
What did you think about the Tim Anderson? Now, he goes on the Barstool podcast with Barstool Carl. I thought it was really good. It's like, damn, you're seeing Tim. You're seeing he's a leader. And then he goes on this one and with Chuck Arfine, and you kind of goes at him a little bit, leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths. At first, I didn't like it. I'll be totally honest with you. The more I listened, though, and the more I listened to that full conversation, I did like it. And I think it's because he was telling you what was going on last year. It's like, hey, maybe the post-game show and all this getting called out shit doesn't bother me, but clearly it bothers some people. So I think he's almost being like, fuck you guys, like, leave him alone. Let's all be positive. I don't think it's him telling you literally to stop criticizing them. Maybe it is. And if that's the case, that's super soft from a guy who, like he says on the podcast repeatedly, he came from nothing, has a chip on his shoulder, which is great. But what did you think about the Tim Anderson comments?
Let me preface with, I loved him. I've loved him for a long time. And these comments don't change how I feel about Tim as a player. I love watching Tim Anderson. I've had a Tim Anderson jersey since his rookie season. Okay. I loved him. I think he's dead wrong. I think that he's dead wrong about what he said. And I promise I listened to the whole context. I listened to the entire conversation. I don't understand. He specifically said that media and Chuck Garfien created confusion last year. Where was the confusion? The only confusion last year was why this team was fucking horrible and why they wildly underperformed their expectations last year. So that part really pissed me off. There was no confusion. There's no confusion. The team sucked. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The team wildly underperformed. And to say that to Chuck Garfien, man, Chuck is the last one off the ship. Chuck was the very last.
Oh, Chuck dude, we both watched every post game show last year. It was must fucking see because I honestly a lot of nights, even in late August, early September, is like, no, still be positive. A lot of season left. Yep. So I will defend Chuck there. He was one of the last guys to jump ship.
Yeah, Chuck is the last guy to jump ship. So for Tim to say it to him was just really confusing to me. No pun intended. And I just think it came off really tone deaf. And if, okay, let me back up a little bit. If Tim is making those comments in order to stand up for others on the team and he views him saying that as being a leader and standing up for guys who, listening to the post-game show, got to them a little bit more than it got to Tim, fine. I can see that. If Tim
that's where this is where I start to get pissed off and do a 180 here, because where the fuck was that last year? And you can say he was injured, but he had two separate stints, and there were times where he could have stood up and fucking said something. And I go back to that All-Star video with him being announced the starter and just like a half-ass little speech. Like, that was Tim Anderson in 21. He'd be up there fucking getting the guys going, like doing something. Like, what the fuck was that? So, like, no, where the fuck were you last year if that's what that was about? And that's the one problem I have with this whole thing. Otherwise, I don't really mind it. And I think that's been the theme with these guys at camp. It's like, hey, we're trying to be done talking about last year. It's unacceptable. But everyone seems to have a chip on their shoulder just to do better collectively. And I think we talked about this at the beginning of the episode. I think the problem last year is all these guys were like, well, Moncada has to hit, and then I got to hit, and then we'll be good. It's like, no. Just do what you normally do. Blend together as a team naturally, and shit'll work.
Couldn't agree more. Where was the leadership last year? We kept asking for it. We kept asking where the leadership was. We kept asking where the accountability was. We kept waiting for somebody to stand up and tell us what the fuck was going on. Never happened. And yes, there were times where Hendricks tried to speak out, or there were times where, other guys would try to make some comments, but
it can't be a starter or a closer. It has to be an everyday player.
I agree. And I don't know if we want to go here. We don't need to if you don't want to, but I think there are some serious questions to be asked about where Tim's head was at last year. Anybody who followed this a little bit knows what I'm talking about in regards to some of the stuff that was on social media in regards to Tim potentially cheating on his wife. I think that there are real questions to be asked about if that had any impact on his leadership. And I'm going to steal this point from Dan Bernstein on 670, but I think it's a fair one. For him to say in the podcast with Garfien that when your wife's not doing so well, you got to pat her on the back and pick her up. Really, Tim? There's like no self-awareness whatsoever in making that comment. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know the specifics of what happened, but whether he cheated on his wife or not, that comes off pretty tone deaf. It really does.
Yeah, it's not a good. Yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I like it if it's for standing up for his teammates, like you said, blah, 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 for what happened last year. Someone had an issue with it. If it's not, you gotta look yourself in the mirror, dude, because this team needed you last year really, really bad, and it didn't get the best version of you. And that's just everyone being honest. I think he knows that, and I think why he's coming out with a little edge and doing these podcasts and and getting himself out there again because he's a fucking ghost last year. And he didn't say
Absolutely.
much, and it was the opposite of 2021. How do you feel about Tim long term? Now he has, let's just say he has a normal Tim Anderson season. We have Colson Montgomery coming up. He's the White Sox best prospect. He's a shortstop. You could move him to second. I don't know if Tim's on the team after 24. I don't know if Tim's on the team after 23.
I don't know either, because I think Tim made it pretty clear in the podcast that he did with Barstool Carl. And if you haven't listened to that, go ahead and listen to it. Both parts are really good. Tim was pretty clear that he knows what his worth is and that he's paying attention to what other high-end shortstops are getting paid, and that he was paying attention this offseason to the contracts that were being handed out. So if Tim comes out and has a normal Tim Anderson season, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he prices himself out of the White Sox market. I think that would be really unfortunate. I'd like to see Tim be a White Sox for his entire career. I think he deserves to be. I think that he's been the face of the franchise for a little bit now, and I want him, selfishly, I want him to be on the White Sox for a long time. At the same time, I don't see the White Sox giving Tim a $175 million extension. Do you?
I do, if he can prove it the next 2 years or year and a half. I don't know. That's a tough question, because then what do you do with Colson Montgomery? And then do you move him to second? Do you move Tim to second? I don't think Tim would want to go to second.
I let Colson Montgomery force that issue. I don't subscribe to the idea that, well, because we have a really good prospect who we think is going to be a really good major league player coming up at a certain position, that we have to keep or get rid of other player who's really good. No, if you have an abundance of talent, awesome.
Figure it the fuck out. I mean, you can move him to third technically too.
And that's already been floated. Now, of course, I would like to see Montgomery stick it short for as long as possible, but there's already been reports that he might be a little bit too tall to stick it short for a long time, and that he might have to move. You can figure that, cross that bridge when you come to it. Fair. Make Colson Montgomery force the issue.
Fair. I'll go into another thing that's been commonly said this spring, and we both knew Jose Abreu was gone and thought he needed to be. Of course, the Sox open up with 4 straight in Houston to start the year, which I think is either going to be really good or really fucking bad. But Jose Abreu gone, not here. How are you feeling about that?
I feel good. I'll stick by what I said at the time, which is on our last podcast, which is that as much as I love Jose, and I think Jose deserves a statue, and I'll be at his jersey retirement game, I think Jose just exacerbated a lot of the roster construction problems that the Sox already had, because they had such a glut at first base and DH. And now Andrew Vaughn can play his natural position, and he can actually be a valuable player this year, because he's not, all of his offensive value is not going to be canceled out by how bad he was defensively. Of course, I'm going to miss Jose. But at the same time, I'm curious to see who's going to step up and be a leader this year. And I know that Eloy said we don't know where the leadership is coming from, which I think was a really dumb thing to say, but it's not the first
Eloy. I can't take Eloy seriously. I think you can't. He doesn't even know what he's talking about.
No, he doesn't. So I'm disappointed to see Jose go, of course, just because I think you've made the point before. He made this team watchable when they were unwatchable for so long. At the same time, it was the right move, no question.
I still agree. It's the right move. It sucks seeing him with the Astros, and I'm sure he'll do well with the Crawford boxes and all that shit. But it was just time. It's time to go. It was just time.
Oh, he's going for 7 homers in that series. He's whatever he did against the Cubs in, what was it, 2020? He's doing that against the White Sox when they play. There's
honestly,
no doubt.
I think I'm going to bet him to hit a home run and his over hits every time he plays the White Sox. He's going to try and stick it to him.
No question.
Which will be fun to watch. But other spring training notes, I think Yaz, what we saw from him this offseason, working out 6 days a week, talking about the discs slippage in his back, and he didn't have any feeling in his right side, which is crazy, his front hitting leg. So when you take your step, he had no feeling there. And he said he's multiple times, I thought I hit the ball 10 rows deep and it was halfway in the right fielder's glove. That's crazy to me. Hopefully he bounces back. I don't think there's much that needs to be said there because he was so fucking bad. Like, stay on the field and be good. I do think it's interesting that Grifol's like, nah, he's not DHing. He's our catcher. Can he withstand that?
Too. Do you think, let me turn the question back to you. Do you think that that's stemming from their sincere belief in Grandal, or do you think that's stemming from a bit of a lack of depth at catcher?
I think it's stemming from, I know this for a fact, Grandal didn't hate Tony as a manager, but hated that he would DH him.
Okay.
He thought it hurt his game to not be catching. And Grifol is the dude who had he was a big reason for Salvador Perez's success in Kansas City. Really close with him, so he's used to that workhorse kind of catcher mentality. But I'd be lying if I don't think that Sefi Zavala being the backup doesn't have fucking something to do with it. He's going to win the backup job, right?
I think so. I don't think Carlos Perez sticks to catcher. I think that Carlos Perez might be able to hit, but I don't really need to see Carlos Perez catching games for the White Sox.
No, and I thought Zavala he looked night and day difference. Even Brittany noticed, like, behind the plate, he wasn't dropping many balls he could block. And if she could notice the difference, no offense, Brittany, I think, he probably did get a little better in that position. Lucas Giolito, free agent after the year, thought he had a really good White Sox Talk podcast yesterday with Chuck. Said a lot of good things. He lost a bunch of weight again. He didn't come in big, and he said he can carry his body around better, blah, 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 blah. Do you think we see a bounce back from Gio, or do we see more of what we saw last year?
I think we see a bounce back from Giolito, not just because of the weight loss, which was obviously the right thing to do, because adding that muscle last year did not turn out to be of benefit to him in the slightest bit. But Giolito's one of those guys where I think that he will work through this. I don't know if we see, top 5 WAR pitcher Giolito this year, but I do think that we see some kind of bounce back this year. I think that the things that you're going to want to look for early in his starts early in the season is the velocity back up, because the velocity was down a tick last year. And then is he mixing in the slider better this year? Because I think that was part of Giolito's issue last year was that people had figured out that fastball changeup combination. I also think that we didn't see the multiple changeups as often last year. We didn't see the balloon changeup and then the put away changeup.
He needs to throw the changeup more. And he needs to, if he has control of the changeup, it's over. Nobody can hit him. Yeah.
The changeup is a better pitch than the slider, but if the slider could be just a real third pitch that he can mix in, then that's going to make the changeup and the fastball play better. So I think watch for his velocity early in the season, watch for the slider usage, watch the slider spin rate as well. I don't have the number in front of me, but his spin rate on his slider last year was god awful. So I know we joked, I hope he spent the whole offseason with Dylan Cease, and Dylan Cease taught him his slider, because I think that that's going to be a pivotal pitch for him this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think we know we're going to get out of Cease and Lynn. I think Lynn healthy will be big. I think him getting ramped up with the World Baseball Classic will actually be good for him, just so he's really into it. His arms warm, all that good shit, body warm. We know he's a big, big dude. Michael Kopech, your boy.
Our boy. But yeah,
our
my
boy. I do love him too. Michael, I miss his long hair. What are we getting out of Michael Kopech this year?
Hopefully 150 innings.
Should be more now.
That's my hope. But I know Steve Stone talked on the broadcast often last year about how Kopech was kind of having the season last year that Cease had the season before that. I don't know.
A lot of dead arm too.
Yep. I don't know if Kopech takes the leap forward that Cease took in 2022. I think he's got the talent to, though. I think that you saw what Kopech was capable of when he was healthy last year. And I give him a hell of a lot of credit for pitching the entire second half of the year on a torn meniscus last season.
Amazing.
Yeah, incredible. But when Kopech's humming and he's healthy, we saw it in New York on that Sunday Night Baseball game last year where he went 7 scoreless and was dominant. He is that guy. He's got that kind of stuff. And I think that he just needs to stay healthy and get as many innings under his belt as possible possible this year. And I think that, I've always said that Kopech is that guy who I will just have blind belief in when he's healthy. And if he's healthy, I think that you're going to see a great season from him this year.
Love it. Kopech stand for a reason on Twitter.
Kopech stand for a reason.
What else do you want to see out of this team in spring training?
I want to see Colson or Oscar Colas have competitive at bats. He's the one guy who we haven't really touched on yet, who I think could be a major X factor on this team. If he finds a way to hit 20 bombs this year, I think that makes a heck of a difference. And he also provides some not just power from the left side, but some competent defense in right field. I think that there's going to be stretches where he strikes out 4 times. He goes 0 for 4 with 4 Ks. I also think that he could go for a week stretch where he hits 3 or 4 home runs in a week. So I think that just seeing what he looks like against some real major league pitchers is something to watch for. I also think as much as we can see Colson Montgomery play, I'd like to, just see how he looks, because I think, like many fans, we haven't gotten a true look at him yet. And then, of course, stay healthy. Nobody get injured in the World Baseball Classic. Please, 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 please.
God, don't do that to us.
I know.
I hope everyone's.
I'm
excited to watch too, but I hope whatever team Eloy and Moncada are playing on is eliminated after like 3 games.
Yes, me too. It just don't get hurt. Don't get hurt. That's obviously. God. I know that's the theme of the season, but just stay healthy. It's a meme at this point, but just stay healthy.
It's funny because I think those are 2 guys too who could benefit greatly from having that high intensity games that let's be honest, they've been in the playoffs only 2 years. So that high intensity of a game, and then let's say they were able to get to the playoffs, I think that helps prepare them, or maybe like a tight division race, better than it did last year to deal with those pressures and things like that, especially as young players. Give me your bounce back player of the year for the White Sox.
Ooh, that's a great question.
Could be like 10 people, but
yeah. Oh, God, there's so many options. Let me sort through them. Ooh. Tim's the obvious one, just because Tim was so bad from May until he got hurt last year. And
he was crazy. He had a great April, as usual.
Yeah, as per usual. I'll go with the little bit less. Well, I think Tim's the obvious one. I think Grandal's a major X factor, and so I hope it's him. I think if Grandal can get back to his second half 2021 form, that totally changes the offensive complexion.
If he had that whole season like that, he'd be in the MVP race.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just came out gangbusters in the second half of 2021. So I think I'll pick him, especially with that interview that he did with Garfine, just describing his offseason plan and just the general sense that he is fully healthy going into this season. I'll take him as my bounce back player.
I was doing fucking hockey workouts. I mean, pretty intense. I'm going to go with Yoan. And I've not shit-talked a player. I've never shit-talked a player more than this guy and question his effort and all this shit. I'm trying to turn a new leaf, and I'm just giving him one more chance. I think there's a lot left there, and I don't think at the same time, I don't think Grifol owes him anything, and the way he's talked, if he's not pulling his weight, he'll fucking start him 2 or 3 times a week, and he'll let Romy or the other utility guys get time at third. So if that's what it's going to be, that's what it's going to be. I just think he rises to the occasion, and I don't think I'm not saying it because I said this last year. I don't think certain situations can get as bad, and they did. So we're just going to have to see. AL Central preview. I don't think the division got better or much better. I think you can argue the Twins did, but they traded away the AL batting champ who murdered us. So
I'm not nervous about the Twins. for whatever reason, I don't believe in their pitching. I don't believe in their bullpen.
No, I think it's what we could see a lot. We're going to see a lot of like we did last year. They could be in first place for like some of May and some of June. And could we get to the All-Star break where they're a game out or a game up? I think that's fine. But it's when it's like the second half or right around the All-Star break last year is when that pitching started to fall off. The hitting started to fall off. They actually had to play some people on their schedule. You remember in August, I was betting on the Yankees every time the Twins played them. It's hilarious. I was making so much money. It was stupid off the Twins being terrible. But I think it's the team that scares me more is the Guardians, just because they have Tito, they have Jose Ramirez, they added Josh Bell, which I thought was a great move for them. I don't know, man. It just seems like a team that's just going to be a pain in our ass.
Well, if you talk about the Sox and needing to, I think part of the Tim conversation was the team have the chip on their shoulder, and does Tim have a chip on his shoulder? If hearing the Guardians say "fuck the White Sox" after they won the division last year and mock you in their clubhouse if that doesn't put a chip on the White Sox shoulder to kick the shit out of the Guardians this year, then I don't know what to tell you.
I'm making a bold prediction. There's not going to be one but two bench clearing situations between the Guardians and Sox this year, as there should be. If you're all that shit you're talking, these are going to be some heated must-watch games. And like you said, if you can't get up for that, which I don't think we're going to see the team have trouble getting up in spots this year under Grifol because he has so much energy himself. It's kind of hard when your manager's like 95.
I would love to see a Josh Naylor pimp a home run against the White Sox this year, and then somebody tell him that he is, just get smoked. I wouldn't. I'm not rooting for anybody to get hurt.
No injuries.
No injuries. We cannot stand for any injuries from a baseball perspective, and I'm not advocating for playing beanball. I'm not that guy. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bench clearing brawl between the Sox and the Guardians this year. Well, what'll be interesting about the Guardians, and that was such the issue when they faced the Sox last year. Well, there were several issues, but their right-handed pitching just dominated the Sox. So the Sox now being much more left-handed with Colas, Grandal coming back, Moncada hopefully being healthy, and having Benintendi in the lineup, how is the Sox getting more left-handed going to play against the Guardians? Very strong right-handed pitching will be something to watch for the division.
Yep, 100%. And I think it's going to make a big difference, as it should. You throw Benintendi at 2 instead of having 4 righties to start off the game against a pitcher like Bieber or Tristan McKenzie. Honestly, I've been doing a lot of playoff best balls, which let me shout out our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy Sports. Literally, they have these MLB best balls, Russ. You basically draft a fantasy team, but you don't set a lineup ever. Your top scoring players aggregate points throughout the whole season, and the top teams move on in advanced rounds. It's very fun. But I have a lot of Tristan McKenzie because his shit is so nasty and he's so young.
Yep.
But again, he's one of those players where if you can get in his head a little bit, you can get to him. And same thing with Bieber. The Sox roughed up Bieber a few times last year. So these guys aren't untouchable. And then if you add the left-handed bats, you would think they'd perform better. But it's one of those things where you're just going to have to prove it. Like in 2021. In 2020, remember down the stretch of that shortened COVID year, we got swept in Cleveland and it ruined our chances of winning the division. So it's the same thing. You're just going to have to prove and then 2021 beat the piss out of everyone in the AL Central. Like, you should have a chip on your shoulder anytime you face these teams, especially in the American League. The fucking Yankees with Donaldson. I'm just trying to think of other teams. Like, even the Blue Jays now with Montoya being a coach there and having that experience, just want to get up for that. Like, there's just different situations where you got to get up and play your best brand of baseball. And it didn't happen a lot last year, but I think it should happen this year. And the schedule too, we get to see some cool teams coming in the guaranteed rate. The Phillies, the Giants. I know I'll definitely try and get to the Phillies series too, even though Harper's not there. It's just a cool team to go see. Obviously we'll play the Mets at some point. That whole NL East is going to be nuts. But who do you see winning the AL Central gun to head? Have to make a prediction right now.
I'll still take the Sox. I don't believe in the Guardians or the Twins.
All right, good man. I'm taking the Sox as well because I'm an idiot. No, hopefully because we're smart and we do it's the right thing, and we're right. All right, gun to head World Series prediction for this year. AL NL team. You don't got to pick a winner.
Ooh, it's the Mets year. They finally get there.
Mets
All that
year.
money finally pays off. Yep, I think the Mets. And then, how do you bet against the Astros, man? How do you bet
I
against
don't
them
know.
getting back?
It's tough. I'm going to do it, though. I'm going to take the Yankees. I'm trying to think about the NL. My brain tells me San Diego, Slam Diego. But I just don't want to see that. No one good enough in the Central. I'll take, fuck it. Yankees, Padres. Rematch of, what was that, 96, 97, maybe? I don't know. But, and I'm not going to pick a winner. It's far too early for that. You don't need to pick one either. But I think the Yankees, much like the Sox, should be playing with a chip on their shoulder. When it comes to the Astros, I think they're going to have that chip. I think the American League Championship Series is probably Yankees Astros again.
I think that I hope that everybody is healthy for that series. I could see that being the series once again. And need, if you could run Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon out there as your 1-2, if you're the Yankees in a playoff series, you do have to feel pretty good about that. It's just, I can't bet against the Astros. I can't.
Yeah. But with that being said, baseball is weird, fluky, goofy. As we always say, just get in. You never know what's going to happen. You get hot. Look at the Braves. Look at the Giants, who did it like 3 years, 3 out of 5 years, 3 out of 6. It's crazy. We'll kind of wrap up the show. Russ, it was a pleasure. Any final thoughts on our White Sox going into 2023? I'm sure we'll have to do maybe we'll do an episode after every month. Each month of the season goes by, and then we just do an episode.
That sounds good to me, man. My final thought: prove me wrong, Bucks. Be better than fine. Be better than fine.
Yeah, my final thoughts: I'm more optimistic than I should be, but it's because I'm putting my faith in some players that showed me a lot in 2021, and maybe I'm holding too much onto that. Maybe that time has passed, and that's not gone. But I believe in you, boys. Please. I don't want my summer to be like last summer.
I admire your optimism, and I hope you're right.
For Russ, this is Nick. We'll see you later, everybody.